The automatic doors of Cedar Creek Market slid open with a familiar whoosh, letting in a wave of late summer heat and a blast of fluorescent light. Officer Natalie Cruz stepped inside, her left hand casually holding a leash, the other resting near her duty belt. She wasn't in pursuit. Not yet. This was supposed to be a stop-and-go trip for a protein bar and maybe a cold tea. Rex walked beside her, his usual relaxed gait giving him the air of a retired athlete, lean, controlled, and quietly powerful. But the moment they crossed the threshold into the store, Natalie felt the shift. Rex froze. It wasn't the kind of stop you expect from a dog distracted by a dropped piece of rotisserie chicken or the smell of deli meats. No, this was something else. His body stiffened, tail down, nose twitching in quick, sharp bursts. His ears were high, then angled. His entire being, muscle, breath, stillness, aligned toward one place. Aisle 9. Natalie felt the tension travel straight through the leash like static electricity. She gave a soft tug. Easy, buddy. What is it? He didn't move. In 7 years working with K-9 units, Natalie had seen Rex react to fentanyl in locked glove compartments, human remains buried under 2 feet of snow, and once to a pressure cooker rigged in a park trash can. But he'd never done this. He had never refused to move forward without an order. The store buzzed around them as usual. The cashier scanned groceries on autopilot. A mother wrangled 2 toddlers into the seat of a cart, one screaming over a dropped juice pouch. A teenage employee stacked apples in a pyramid near the front. No one noticed the dog growling. No one but her. Then came the sound, so low it could have been missed entirely. Not a bark, not a growl, a whimper. Rex let out a single breathy whine, his body crouching slightly like he was preparing for something invisible. Natalie's skin prickled. His eyes were fixed on aisle 9. She couldn't see anything yet, but she trusted that look, that posture. It was the same one he'd used once when he found a terrified boy trapped inside a utility drain behind a burning trailer. She adjusted her grip on his harness, her voice low and calm. "Show me." Rex moved now, slowly, methodically, each paw step silent on the waxed tile. As they neared the cereal aisle, Natalie scanned ahead. Everything looked painfully normal. Rows of cartoon-colored boxes, an elderly man debating brands of oatmeal, a young couple comparing peanut butter labels. Rex veered left, then stopped so sharply that Natalie nearly tripped. He pressed close to the shelving on the right. His snout lifted, nose flaring. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared intently at a particular section of stacked cereal boxes, fruit blasters, cinnamon dreams, something generic with a smiling monkey. Natalie took a half step forward, eyes narrowing. The boxes looked off. Not just stocked haphazardly, but purposeful, like someone had wedged them in too tightly. There was a thin gap between them and the metal back of the shelf, just enough space to slip a hand through. And then, something moved. It wasn't dramatic. A subtle twitch, a shuffle. Then, clear as day, a small hand, fingers trembling, retreated quickly behind the boxes. Natalie's heart slammed into her ribs. She lifted her shoulder mic. "Unit 413 requesting immediate backup at Cedar Creek Market. Possible hostage or missing child located. Aisle 9. Advise tactical entry. No lights, no sirens. Do not escalate. Child is present." She turned back to the shelf, dropping to a crouch, Rex beside her like a stone lion. She whispered, "It's okay. My name's Natalie. I'm with the police. You're safe now." There was silence. Then a voice, barely audible, barely real. "Don't let him know you found me." Natalie's breath caught. Her mind raced. This wasn't a game of hide and seek. This was controlled fear, trained silence. Someone had taught this child how not to scream. She didn't call out. Instead, she pulled the multi-tool from her belt and wedged it gently into the side of the shelf, nudging a gap wide enough to peek through. Her flashlight stayed off. Her movements were slow, careful, controlled. Behind the shelf, in a dark crawl space barely wide enough to hold her, a girl no older than 6 sat hunched with a pink backpack pressed to her chest. Her hair was matted, cheeks smudged, eyes ringed red from exhaustion or tears, or both. "My ankle," the girl whispered. "He tied it to the bottom bar." Natalie's brain processed quickly. If she yanked, she could injure the girl or alert whoever did this. She reached for her radio again. "Advise tactical. Suspect likely still in store. Move in quiet through stockroom. Have security pull footage. Focus on last 24 hours. No one leaves." Rex shifted beside her. His breathing changed. His ears twitched and then flattened. 1 second he was next to her, still and ready. The next, he was gone. Vanished like a shadow around the aisle corner. Natalie's stomach turned. She knew that move. It meant the suspect was on the move. Rex had caught a trail. She stayed with the girl, pulling out a small pocket knife and cutting slowly through the cord at her ankle, all while murmuring reassurance. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "You're safe. Just a few more seconds." And then, echoing from the back of the store, a bark, not a warning, a battle cry. It was followed by a crash, a shout, and then silence. 2 minutes later, the radio crackled. "K9 has apprehended suspect in loading dock. Male, late 30s, no employee ID, found accessing restricted stockroom area, backup en route, scene secured." Natalie exhaled. She slid the last of the bindings off the girl's ankle and gently pulled her out into the aisle. The girl didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just turned her face toward the end of the row and whispered one word. "Rex." The dog was already jogging back, a deep red scratch above his eye, but tail wagging gently. He leaned into the girl like he was apologizing for being away so long. Natalie crouched beside her, heart thudding as the reality of what had just happened began to settle. No one had seen her. Not the store clerks, not the other customers, not even the cameras yet. But Rex did. And that changed everything. Back at the cruiser, the air conditioning blew stale coolness across the dashboard, doing little to cut through the heat or the adrenaline still pulsing through Officer Natalie Cruz's veins. She leaned back in the driver's seat, watching paramedics gently load the girl, Luna, as she whispered, into the back of the ambulance. Rex sat at attention beside her, panting lightly, his body still charged but still. His coat was matted with sweat near the collar, and a faint red scratch cut just beneath his right eye. He hadn't made a sound about it. "You're bleeding," Natalie said softly, reaching into the glove box for gauze. She dabbed gently at the cut. Rex didn't flinch. He just kept his eyes locked on the ambulance. He wasn't watching for danger. He was watching her. "She didn't even look for me," Natalie murmured. "Just you." Rex blinked once, slow and deliberate. His chest rose and fell with calm control, like the storm inside him had passed, but not far behind. She hadn't expected any of this. The plan that morning was simple. Finish her early patrol, maybe stop at Cedar Creek Market for something to hold her over until shift change. Nothing urgent, nothing traumatic. But then again, no one ever wakes up knowing today is the day they'll pull a kidnapped child out from behind cereal boxes. The EMT closed the rear door of the ambulance, gave Natalie a thumbs up, and pulled away with Luna tucked inside. She'd barely spoken, only clutched Rex's ruff like he was the only real thing in the world. Natalie exhaled and looked down at her partner. "You caught her scent before you even saw her, before she made a sound. How do you do that?" Rex gave a soft grunt, shifted slightly so that his hip pressed into her leg, and rested his chin on her knee. That was his answer. At the precinct, everything turned clinical fast. Crime scene units swept the market. Detectives locked the man, identified as Marcus Elroy, into interrogation. His prints matched an open file flagged by another state, though details were still coming through. In the meantime, Natalie stayed quiet, her mind stuck in the echo of that aisle, the weight of the leash, the whimper from Rex, the hand behind the cereal. She found herself sitting on the station's rear steps, Rex beside her, a bottle of warm water in her hand. The noise of the precinct buzzed inside, but she just needed a second. A minute to remind herself she had done something right today. Or rather, that Rex had. "Do you remember Kandahar?" she asked quietly, staring out at the parking lot. "Because sometimes I think you do." Rex tilted his head slightly, not in confusion, but in the way he did when something familiar was said. He had been a bomb detection dog overseas before ending up back in the States. When Natalie got paired with him 2 years ago, she'd read the file 3 times: improvised device recovery, casualty retrieval, several confirmed combat zone saves. The last handler was injured in a roadside blast. Rex had stayed beside him until medics arrived. Natalie had expected a broken dog. Instead, she got a warrior. The first time they worked together, Rex had sniffed out heroin laced with carfentanil hidden under a toddler's car seat. The mother had claimed she didn't know. Rex hadn't cared. He never did. He only knew what was true. Now this. Natalie tapped her fingers on the bottle. She didn't call for her mum, not once. Rex blinked up at her. "I'm not sure that's the part that gets me," she continued. "It's that she knew not to, like she'd been taught to stay silent." She'd seen that before. In domestic cases, in human trafficking rings, even in war. The training of fear. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Officer Kellerman, who had been helping review the store's surveillance footage. All it said was, "You need to see this." She stood quickly, Rex at her side in a heartbeat, and made her way to the tech room. The screen displayed footage from 7:53 a.m., nearly 2 hours before Natalie and Rex had arrived. A man in a red polo shirt with a name tag reading Brent walked calmly through the employee-only stockroom door. No one questioned him. He wasn't stopped. He was holding a child's backpack. The timestamp clicked forward. At 8:01, the same man exited a different stockroom entrance, this time alone, wiping his hands on his pants. The footage then jumped to 8:19. A blur of movement, a flash of pink, a child in a school uniform being led by the same man. Her gait was stiff. She wasn't struggling, but she wasn't relaxed either. "Jesus," Kellerman muttered. "It looks like she trusted him." "Or he drugged her," Natalie said. She moved like someone trying not to fall asleep. Security had no employee named Brent, no records, no shift assignments, no vendors scheduled that morning either. "He wasn't improvising?" Natalie said, pointing at the screen. "He planned this, the time, the entry point, even the aisle." Kellerman nodded grimly. "He knew where the blind spots were. Only reason we caught any of this was because Rex made you stop at the cereal aisle." Rex, lying at her feet, shifted and let out a low chuff, bored of being talked about like he wasn't there. Natalie crouched beside him, ran her fingers through his ruff. "You're right," she said. "You don't just save. You see." That night, she couldn't sleep. She poured herself a glass of water she didn't drink and stared out her apartment window as the town. Lights dimmed beneath the rising fog. On the couch, Rex snored gently, curled into a tight circle. Every so often, his paws twitched, running in his dreams again. Natalie sat down beside him, one hand resting lightly on his back. "Why you?" she asked. Rex didn't stir. "What did you hear back there that we couldn't? What did you smell? Was it her fear? His scent? Or was it just instinct? She paused, unsure whether she was thinking aloud or asking for real. And how many others didn't have someone like you? She didn't say it aloud, but the question remained. Would anyone have found Luna if not for you? At dawn, she would receive an email from a regional FBI coordinator requesting a joint meeting about the suspect. But for now, in the quiet dark, there was only the sound of breathing. Heron Rex's, and the memory of a growl that stopped everything. The pediatric wing at Crestfield Regional smelled like antiseptic and fruit punch. Nurse Amanda had told Natalie it was bubblegum-scented hand soap, but Natalie didn't buy it. It smelled like tension wrapped in a child-proof bottle. Room 412 sat quiet, the blinds drawn halfway to block the late afternoon sun. Luna lay curled on the hospital bed, her pink backpack resting beside her like a safety blanket. She hadn't let go of it since they arrived, and she still hadn't spoken. Not to the ER nurse, not to the social worker, not to the detective who tried gently to ask her name. But she had looked at Rex. When he walked into the room, tail low but wagging, the first movement flickered across her face, eyelids twitching, shoulders dropping just slightly. She didn't say anything, but she patted the blanket beside her like she was calling an old friend home. Rex jumped onto the bed, turned once, and laid his body against hers like a warm wall. His breathing was steady, almost theatrical in its calmness. Natalie stood by the doorway, her badge tucked under her jacket, trying not to look like authority. "She's holding everything in," Nurse Amanda whispered. But the moment he walked in, she blinked. "That's more than we've seen." Natalie nodded. "He's good at that." Inside, the little girl ran her fingers through the fur behind Rex's ears, as if she'd known him forever. No words, just touch. Natalie stepped further into the room and crouched by the side of the bed. "Hey, Luna, I'm Natalie. I'm the one who found you at the store. But really, he's the one you should thank." Luna didn't speak, but she nodded. "Can I ask you something?" Natalie said, "You don't have to answer if you don't want to." Luna looked at her, waiting. "That man at the store, did he say anything to you before he left you there?" Luna's grip tightened around Rex's neck. She shook her head slowly, then whispered so quietly it was nearly missed. "He said no one would hear me." Natalie didn't move. But Rex did. Luna added, almost to herself, "He heard everything." Natalie swallowed hard. "Yes, sweetheart," she said. "He did." Back at the precinct, the investigation was unfolding like a crime novel you wish you'd never opened. Detectives had started digging into Marcus Elroy's past. The man hadn't just wandered into town by accident. He'd been planning for weeks, seen on gas station cameras, store surveillance, even signing into a local library under a false name. All of it methodical, too clean, too careful. And then there was the storage unit. Detective Larson called her in with a voice too flat to be casual. The space was rented under the name Brent C. Malloy. Inside, rows of labeled boxes, zip ties, kids' backpacks, girls' shoes, candy, dolls, and a calendar with names scribbled in ink, some circled in red. There were burner phones, receipts, a set of binoculars, a map with pins in places that shouldn't be connected, small-town parks, strip malls, elementary schools. Natalie stared at it and felt something shift in her spine. He wasn't just improvising. Larson muttered. This was a circuit, and Luna wasn't the first. She turned to him slowly. "How long has he been doing this?" "Too long." Back at the hospital, Luna had started drawing. Not people, not houses, dogs, dozens of dogs, each one with bold ears, watchful eyes, and the same black and tan coloring. Rex in cape, Rex with wings, Rex staring down a shadowy figure near cereal boxes, Rex in a superhero mask. The therapist, Dr. Kim, sat beside Natalie in the observation room, watching Luna as she colored on the padded mat, Rex curled beside her like a sentinel carved from fur. "She's communicating," Dr. Kim said, voice low. "Not verbally yet, not fully. But these drawings, this is her language. She sees him as her protector. Number more than that," Kim replied. "She sees him as the only one who knew what no one else did, that she was there, that she mattered." Natalie turned toward the glass. Luna was now drawing a large brown box with a tiny figure inside. In the corner, Rex's nose poked through. "She's not just drawing memories," Kim said. "She's drawing hope." That evening, Natalie sat alone in her apartment, the air conditioner humming weakly above her. Rex dozed on the rug, one paw twitching. She pulled her laptop onto her knees and opened a blank document, and started writing. Not a report, not a statement for the record, a story. She called it "He Heard What We Couldn't." She wrote about that moment when Rex froze at aisle 9, how his posture changed, how he whimpered before leading her to a wall of cereal boxes, and beyond that, to a girl no one else saw. She didn't write about protocol or training. She wrote about instinct, about a dog who had survived a war zone only to use his gift in a grocery store on a Tuesday. When she was done, she emailed it to a friend at the local paper with a short note. "You can run this if you think it matters." She closed the laptop, looked down at Rex and whispered, "You didn't just save her." He didn't wake up, but his tail thumped once on the floor, as if to say, "I know." It was just past 8 a.m. when the first call came in. Natalie was in the middle of drying off Rex after an early run through the park trails behind her apartment when her work phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Unknown number, no voicemail. Then a second buzz, this time a text from Sergeant Owens. "Need you at the station. It's about the Elroy case. Bring Rex." Natalie's gut tightened. She didn't ask questions. 15 minutes later, she pushed open the precinct's rear entrance. Rex at her side, his coat still damp, smelling faintly of pine and rain. Inside, the squad room was buzzing. Too many people for a Tuesday morning. Several unfamiliar faces, federal windbreakers with the telltale letters FBI. "Cruz!" Owens waved her in. "Conference room 3, and don't leave the dog." The room was crowded. Maps and files were spread across the long table. A corkboard in the corner showed a cluster of red pins across 5 states. Names, dates, some with photos, some just with ages. 11, 9, 6. Agent Rivera stood near the board. She didn't waste time. "We've confirmed 3 additional abductions connected to Marcus Elroy. 2 confirmed, 1 still open. All match the pattern. Small town locations, indoor sites with low surveillance, public trust settings." Natalie sat, jaw tight. "How do we know they're his?" Rivera flipped a photo onto the table. It was grainy, pulled from a discount store's CCTV. A man in a red polo shirt, fake name tag just like before, walking a little girl toward the stockroom. The timestamp read 2 months prior. Tulsa County. Same uniform, same gait, same smile. Rivera said. "And here's the twist. We found his old burner phone, thought it was wiped, but techs recovered fragments from the cloud backup." She slid a printed screenshot across the table. A note written in a text draft. "Tuesday, 8 a.m., light foot traffic, cereal aisle, rear corner, no cameras." Natalie's throat dried. "That's our store," she whispered. Rivera nodded. "He planned for the blind spots, but your dog didn't care about blind spots." From the floor, Rex stirred slightly, as if sensing he was being discussed. He shifted into a sphinx-like posture, eyes alert but relaxed. Natalie glanced down at him. "He caught what we couldn't." Rivera looked at her. "We think Elroy's been practicing this method for years, rotating cities, adjusting times. But Luna was the interruption, and Rex was the variable. The agents laid out the timeline. Elroy had aliases in 3 states: rental properties, storage units, burner phones, ride-share records with fake IDs. He was methodical, precise, which made his mistake even more telling. "He got lazy," said Owens. "Too comfortable?" "No," Natalie said, her voice low. "He got confident, thought no one would ever see past the uniform and the smile." She glanced toward Rex again. But Rex didn't need to see him. He felt her. Later that day, Natalie returned to the hospital with Rex. Luna had asked for him by name, not for Natalie, not for her mother, just for the dog. Inside room 412, Luna sat cross-legged on the bed with a pile of crayons beside her. As soon as Rex entered, she brightened, patting the bed. He hopped up, circled once, and curled against her like he belonged nowhere else. Natalie stayed near the doorway, watching. "She talks to him," the nurse whispered. "Not us, but him." "What kind of things?" The nurse shrugged. "Little things. She tells him about the sky outside, what she dreamed last night. She asked if dogs ever have bad dreams too." Natalie didn't answer, but she knew. She walked to the edge of the bed and crouched beside Luna. "Hey there." Luna looked at her, but didn't speak. Her hand rested on Rex's side, moving slowly. "We found some things," Natalie said gently. "Stuff that might help us make sure he never hurts anyone else. You did good, Luna. You were so brave." Luna looked back down at Rex. "I wasn't brave. I was scared." Natalie nodded. "That's what being brave is." Luna was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "He told me I'd be alone, that no one would come." Her voice didn't crack, but it wavered, like a tightrope on wind. Natalie reached out, careful not to crowd her. "But you weren't alone." "No," Luna whispered. Rex came. That night, Natalie sat on the steps of her apartment building, the sky overhead bruised purple with the last light of day. Rex lay beside her, head resting on her boot. She opened her phone, pulled up the story she had written, the one the paper published that morning. He heard what we couldn't. It had already been shared hundreds of times. A few local stations picked it up. One parent had emailed the department, saying the article reminded her of a man she'd seen lingering near her daughter's school last year. She hadn't reported it then. Now she had. Natalie stared at the message a long time. Rex huffed softly, then rolled over, exposing his stomach like a clown. She chuckled and scratched his chest. "You don't even know what you did, do you?" He blinked up at her, tongue lolling out. But in that moment she realized something. He didn't need to know. He just needed to be there. And somehow that was enough. Natalie hadn't meant to stop by the hospital that night. She'd told herself she needed rest, maybe a meal that didn't come from a vending machine. But halfway through the drive home, her hands turned the wheel without asking her permission, and she found herself pulling into the ER lot at Crestfield Regional. Rex sat in the back seat, calm but alert, as if he knew where they were headed. Inside, the halls had quieted. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A janitor pushed a mop bucket past a row of vending machines. The nurse at the pediatric check-in gave Natalie a small smile and waved her through without a word. Room 412. Luna was awake, sitting cross-legged on the hospital bed in a hoodie 2 sizes too big. Her mother, Allison, sat beside her, a paper cup of coffee cradled in her hands like it might spill something more than caffeine. The moment Rex entered, Luna's posture softened. She reached for him without hesitation, and he climbed onto the bed, curled beside her, and pressed his side against hers like a weighted blanket made of trust. Natalie stepped inside quietly. "She hasn't eaten much," Allison whispered, but she asked if Rex could stay again. I didn't know if that was allowed. Natalie nodded. We're making exceptions. Allison's hand trembled slightly as she set the cup down. She had a nightmare. Screamed herself hoarse. I couldn't wake her up. I couldn't do anything. She's safe now. Natalie said. I know, but my body doesn't. Not yet. Across the room, Luna whispered into Rex's ear. No one could hear what she said, but his ears flicked and his tail thumped once in reply. Natalie sat in the chair near the bed. Do you want to talk? Luna shook her head. Not yet. That's okay. A few minutes passed. Then Luna said, He told me if I screamed, he'd leave me there forever, and no one would come. Natalie kept her voice even. But someone did. Luna nodded. He heard me. She didn't look at Natalie, just kept her fingers resting on Rex's ribs, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath. He always hears. The words echoed through the room like something older than her years. Not just a memory, an understanding. The next morning, the FBI sent word. They'd decrypted a portion of Elroy's laptop, recovered from the false bottom of a storage unit in Kentucky. What they found made 2 agents step out of the room and not return for 15 minutes. There were folders, labeled with initials, dates, photos. There was a database of routines, school schedules, even parent work hours. This wasn't impulsive. It wasn't sloppy. It was engineered. Natalie sat in the task force room, surrounded by faces that had grown more hollow by the hour. A tech analyst flipped through the contents of a folder labeled simply Red Targets. Luna's photo was the 3rd file. Sergeant Owens leaned back in his chair and muttered, He had her picked out weeks ago. Rivera, the agent from the FBI, stood and paced. We have a problem. Elroy isn't talking. Not a word since his arrest. His lawyer's playing hardball. No confession, no cooperation, no plea. Natalie rubbed the bridge of her nose. And Luna? Too young to be a reliable primary witness in court. Rivera replied. Her testimony could get tossed unless it's supported by other evidence. So, what now? Rivera looked at her. We need someone else, another victim, someone who made it out and remembers. Or we need someone who knew him. Natalie looked down at Rex, curled beneath the table like a stone. His ears twitched slightly, as if even now he was listening for something no one else could hear. Later that day, Luna surprised them all. It was during her therapy session with Dr. Kim, sitting cross-legged on a rubber mat in the playroom while Rex dozed nearby. She had been brushing his coat with a plastic comb shaped like a fish. And then, without prompting, she spoke. His eyes didn't smile. Dr. Kim looked up gently. Whose eyes, Luna? The man at the store. He smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. They were dead. She said it like she was reading from a memory she'd stored in a box somewhere behind her ribs. Carefully. Deliberately. Dr. Kim nodded. That's a very important detail. Thank you. He told me he worked there. He said my mum was in the parking lot, that I could help carry the groceries. But she wasn't outside. Did you try to leave? I tried. He told me if I made noise, no one would ever believe me. Rex opened his eyes then. He didn't move. He just looked at her. But he did, Luna whispered. When Natalie arrived that evening to check in, Dr. Kim met her outside the room. She remembered something, Kim said, and she gave us language we can use in court. Inside, Luna handed Natalie a drawing. It was a picture of cereal boxes stacked tall like a wall. Behind them, a small figure crouched with a pink backpack. And in front of the wall, a dog, bold, forward, alert, drawn in sweeping strokes of black and tan crayon. Above it, in Luna's blocky handwriting, he heard what no one else did. Natalie swallowed the lump in her throat. Is this for me? Luna shook her head. It's for him. She knelt down and handed it to Rex, who sniffed it once, and then did the thing he only did when something truly moved him. He pressed his forehead gently into Luna's chest and stayed there. No barking, no commands, just presence. And sometimes presence was louder than anything else. The rain started just as Natalie and Rex pulled into the parking lot outside Luna's school. It wasn't loud, not the kind that made headlines or flooded intersections, just a steady rhythm tapping against the windshield, like a heartbeat too calm for what she was about to do. She turned off the ignition, took a breath, and looked in the rearview mirror. Rex sat perfectly still, his amber eyes locked on her, his head tilted slightly, not confused, not anxious, just ready. "You think I'm doing the right thing?" Natalie asked, voice low. Rex didn't move, but his tail thumped once. She took that as a yes. Inside the school, the hallway smelled like pencil shavings and cafeteria tater tots. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the tile floor squeaked under. Wet soles. Natalie walked slowly, her uniform jacket zipped halfway up, a wrapped package tucked under her arm. Rex walked beside her, head high, shoulders steady. He didn't wear his working vest today. He didn't need it. Every teacher and staff member who passed gave a nod of respect. Some paused long enough to reach out and brush their fingers gently across his shoulder, as if afraid to disturb whatever invisible energy hung around him. Outside classroom 2B, Luna sat at a small table with a crayon in hand. She was drawing again, this time something with stars, a dog in flight, maybe a cape. Natalie knocked once on the doorframe. Luna looked up, and her face broke into the kind of smile that doesn't happen by accident. "Hey, kiddo." Luna dropped the crayon and ran to the doorway. She didn't hug Natalie. She didn't need to. She went straight to Rex. He lowered himself to the ground and let her wrap her arms around his neck. He licked her cheek once, then settled, pressing his side to hers like a seal against the cold. "I brought you something," Natalie said, crouching down and unwrapping the package. It was a brand new backpack, navy blue, with stitched patches along the straps, a paw print, a gold star, and a silver badge that read, "He heard me." Luna's eyes went wide. She traced the words with her fingers, then opened the zipper. Inside, she found a laminated card with Rex's photo, tongue out, tail mid-wag. Beneath it were the words, "K9 partner, Luna Blake. Unit status, brave." She looked up, stunned. "Is this for real?" "Completely official," Natalie said, smiling, and he approved it. Behind her, one of the teachers wiped her eyes and turned away. That afternoon, the FBI briefing room at the Regional Task Force Center was more tense than usual. Natalie stood at the back, arms crossed, as agents clicked through slides on a projector. Elroy's digital files had continued to unlock. Messages, purchase records, searches. Then came the bombshell. "He had an accomplice," Agent Rivera said, flipping to a new slide. The photo showed a man maybe 10 years younger than Elroy, lanky, with hollow eyes and a thin beard. A former IT technician who had done time for hacking minor school databases. The two men had overlapped in a private online forum, one now shut down by the Bureau. "This wasn't just one guy," Rivera said. "This was a pattern, a plan." Natalie felt her chest tighten. "So what broke the cycle?" Rivera paused. "We did, because a dog didn't walk past an aisle when everyone else did." Later that week, Natalie and Rex were invited to speak at a community safety event at the town center. It wasn't her thing, microphones, speeches, the awkward applause. But she went anyway. Luna was in the front row, sitting on her mum's lap, backpack strapped tight to her shoulders. Her drawing, Rex flying over cereal boxes, had been printed on the event flyers. Underneath the image, it read, "Courage comes on 4 paws." Natalie stepped up to the mic, cleared her throat, and looked out over the crowd. I'm not much of a speaker, she said, but I know what matters. She gestured to Rex, who sat calmly at her heel. This dog doesn't wear a cape. He doesn't ask questions. He just listens. And one day that saved a life. She paused, let the silence breathe for a second. There are monsters out there, the kind that hide in daylight, the kind that know how to smile. But there are heroes too, the kind who don't need words to speak the truth. In the crowd, Luna reached for her mum's hand. And sometimes, Natalie said, it takes a child and a dog to remind us what bravery really looks like. The applause was quiet at first. Then it grew, not loud, but solid, grounded. That night, Natalie sat on the porch, a blanket over her knees, Rex lying at her feet. The stars blinked above like tiny, watchful eyes. "You're changing her," she whispered. "You know that, right?" Rex didn't stir. He just shifted his weight closer to her boot, his breathing calm, even, steady, as if to say, "Not just her. You too." The courtroom was too big for a child. High ceilings, polished wood, flags behind the bench. It was meant to intimidate, and it did. Even seasoned officers felt their spines stiffen inside those walls. But Luna sat at the edge of a witness chair, legs dangling above the floor, back straight. Not defiant, not even brave in the adult sense of the word. Just steady. Beside her, lying with his front paws crossed and head high, was Rex. He wore no vest, no harness, but a grey mat had been laid at the base of the stand, authorized by the court. Trauma response K9, allowed during sensitive witness testimony. Rex didn't blink, didn't shift. His body faced out toward the gallery, but his attention was only on her. Natalie sat 3 rows back, behind the prosecutor's table, hands laced together too tightly. She'd testified in murder trials, raided meth labs, tracked suspects across frozen woods. But this was harder. The judge leaned forward slightly, a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and a soft voice. "Luna, do you understand why you're here today?" Luna nodded. "To tell the truth." "That's right. And do you promise to do that?" "Yes, ma'am." The prosecutor, ADA Lillian Hart, rose slowly. Her tone was gentle, almost like talking to a skittish bird. "Luna, I want to ask you about the day you met Officer Cruz and Rex. Is that okay?" Luna looked down at the dog. Rex turned his head slightly, just enough to catch her eye. That was all she needed. She nodded. "Do you remember what store you were in?" "Cedar Creek Market." "What aisle were you in?" 9. "What was around you?" "Cereal and granola. The peanut butter shelf was on the other side." A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably at how precise that was. Natalie didn't move. "Was there someone with you in that aisle?" Hart asked. Luna hesitated. Her hand moved to rest on Rex's shoulder. "Yes." "Do you see him in this courtroom?" Luna didn't point. She didn't need to. Her voice was calm. "He's sitting behind the man in the blue tie. He has the same eyes." A collective pause swept through the room. Paul Elroy sat still, his attorney whispering something he didn't seem to hear. He looked straight ahead, but his jaw clenched. That was all Natalie needed to see. Hart continued. "Can you tell us what he said to you when he brought you to the store?" Luna swallowed. "He said my mum was waiting outside, that I should help carry the groceries." "Was your mum there?" "No." "What happened next?" "He pulled me into the back, through a door that said employees only. He knew the code. There was a little room with mops and boxes. He told me to sit down and be quiet. Then he tied my foot to a pipe." Luna's fingers gripped Rex's fur a little tighter. "He said if I screamed, I'd be there forever, that no one would hear me." She paused. Her voice shrank. But he was wrong. Rex let out a single breath, not loud, not theatrical, just a slow exhale. enough to break the tension like a pin to a balloon. And who found you? Rex did. He heard me. Did you make noise? No, but he still knew you were there. Luna looked at him. He always knows. The defense attorney stood slowly, an older man with white hair and a hesitant step. Luna, I understand this is difficult, and you're doing very well. I just have a couple of questions, okay? She didn't answer. He tried again. You mentioned the man had the same eyes. Can you be sure it's the same person you saw that day? Luna's voice didn't waver. His eyes didn't smile. I remember that. Excuse me. People who smile for real, it reaches their eyes. But his didn't. His were empty. The attorney stopped. That was not a rehearsed answer. That was truth dressed in 7-year-old language. He looked at the judge. No further questions. The hearing wasn't the trial itself. That would come later. This was the evidentiary hearing, whether the case would move to federal court under expanded charges. It took the judge less than 5 minutes to rule. All motions for dismissal denied. Given the testimony, physical evidence, and electronic data, this court finds sufficient cause to proceed to federal trial. Defendant is remanded into custody. As the gavel came down, a woman in the gallery sobbed quietly. Another reached out and touched her arm. Natalie stood. Her knees felt stiff, but her chest felt different. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered near the stairs, hoping for statements. Natalie moved quickly, shielding Luna and her mother from view. Rex walked in front of them like a living barrier. No growling, no theatrics, just presence. Luna climbed into the back seat of her mother's car and looked up through the window at Natalie. Will he come visit me again? Natalie smiled. He wouldn't miss it. Inside her jacket pocket, folded neatly, was another drawing Luna had slipped into her hand after the hearing. It showed a girl standing in a courtroom. Across from her was a figure in a cage made of paper and light. Behind the girl stood a dog, strong, tall, watching. At the top, Luna had written in blue crayon, "The dog who didn't let me be afraid." Natalie didn't cry easily, but that almost did it. The morning sun slanted across Crestfield's town square, casting long golden streaks on folding chairs and picnic blankets. Red, white, and blue bunting fluttered from lampposts. A brass band tuned up near the courthouse steps, the notes warm and slightly off-key in the breeze. It wasn't Independence Day. It wasn't a parade for a football team or a campaign rally. It was K9 Rex Appreciation Day. The mayor had signed the proclamation himself after a unanimous city council vote. No objections. Not after what had happened. Not after Luna. Natalie stood near the podium, dressed in formal blues, her hair neatly tied back. Rex sat beside her, wearing a polished leather harness with one word stitched in bold white. Hero. He didn't seem to notice the crowd. His focus, as always, was forward. Watching. Waiting. At the front row, Luna sat on her mom's lap, holding a bouquet of wildflowers tied with twine. Her backpack, the one with the paw patch and the laminated K9 badge, rested proudly at her feet. Mayor Dalton stepped to the microphone. He was a rotund man with an easy smile, the kind of politician who actually knew the names of your kids and didn't mind waiting in line for coffee. In this town, he began, we've celebrated a lot of things. Little League championships, ribbon cuttings, school plays. But today, we honor something more rare, quiet bravery. He gestured toward Rex. Courage that doesn't demand attention, loyalty that doesn't need reward, the kind that listens when no one else does. There were no fireworks, no loud applause, just a steady rise of clapping hands and some teary-eyed nods from neighbors who'd followed the case like it was personal. Because it was. When it was Natalie's turn to speak, she didn't bring her notes. She stepped to the mic, heart pounding in her throat, and looked at the people who'd sent her handwritten letters, who'd dropped off dog treats at the station, who'd emailed the department asking how they could help other children like Luna. She looked down at Rex, lying in the grass at her feet, tail thumping every few seconds like a lazy metronome. "I thought I trained this dog," she began. Soft laughter. "But really, he trained me." She paused, hand steady on the podium. "He taught me to slow down, to listen, that sometimes silence isn't empty. It's full of signals we haven't learned how to read." She took a breath. "When we walked into that grocery store, I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. But he did. Because he doesn't just see with his eyes, he sees with his instincts. And because of that, a little girl is alive." Luna lifted her hand and waved slightly. Rex's ears perked. "And now," Natalie said, "because of one dog, more people are paying attention. More stores are improving security. More departments are asking for K-9 funding. We've received letters from other families, other survivors. Some of them had never spoken before. But after they saw Luna, after they saw Rex, they decided to tell their stories." She looked straight at the crowd. "This isn't just a celebration, it's a wake-up call. Because sometimes the difference between a tragedy and a miracle is a dog that refuses to look away." After the speeches, a group of fourth graders sang, "You've Got a Friend in Me," slightly off-key, which made it all the more perfect. Luna walked up and placed her bouquet around Rex's neck like a lei. He tolerated it with the patience of a soldier being pinned with a medal he didn't think he needed. Later that evening, as the town quieted, Natalie sat on her porch with a beer gone flat in her hand, and Rex lying on the porch swing like he owned the place. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from a woman in Kansas City. She didn't leave her name, just wrote, "Your dog made me realize what I saw years ago wasn't nothing. I told my mom. She believed me. I'm going to the police tomorrow. I hope they listen." Natalie read it twice, then set the phone down and looked at Rex. "You did that," she said. He yawned, loud and theatrical, then dropped his head onto her boot. The next morning, she stopped by Luna's school with a package. The kids were out at recess, the sun warm on the grass, the playground echoing with laughter that hadn't always existed there. Inside the package, a hand-drawn comic book Luna had made, printed and bound with staples. The cover showed a dog leaping through a storm of cereal boxes, eyes blazing, cape flapping. Title, "The Dog Who Listened First." The last page showed a girl asleep in bed, and Rex curled beside her. The caption read, "He doesn't sleep unless I do. He listens in dreams too." Natalie folded the book, tucked it under her arm, and walked back out into the sun. There was more work to do, more stories waiting. But for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like hope. The trial didn't begin with fireworks, no camera flashes, no pounding gavel, just the sound of a clerk calling names and the low hum of voices in the federal courthouse. But something had changed. Paul Elroy had pled not guilty to the initial charges, clinging to the hope that the lack of physical harm and Luna's age would weaken the prosecution's case. That hope disappeared the moment the first additional victim came forward. She was 13 now, had gone missing from a grocery store outside Topeka 2 years earlier. Reappeared 2 days later, walking barefoot into a gas station, dazed and silent. Her case had gone cold, until the article about Rex hit the regional paper. She showed her mum the photo. "That's him," she'd whispered. Her story matched Luna's almost perfectly, approached by a man claiming to work at the store, taken through a side door, threats about what would happen if she made noise. Same red polo, same fake smile, same eyes. Suddenly, Elroy's legal team wasn't as confident. They requested a deal, plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for avoiding federal conspiracy. The district attorney declined. By the second week, 2 more victims were identified. 1 boy, 1 girl, both under 10. One of them had drawn a picture in therapy 3 months earlier, of a cereal aisle and a pair of dead eyes behind a smiling mouth. The courtroom air grew thicker with every new piece of evidence: photos, floor plans, email logs, burned phones and storage unit leases. It became clear this hadn't been random. It was systemic, targeted, predatory. But what changed the course of the trial wasn't any of that. It was Luna. The judge had allowed her previous testimony to stand, given her age and the trauma involved. But when asked whether she'd be willing to appear for closing arguments, to show the jury she wasn't just a case file, she said yes, as long as Rex could come. And he did. He walked into that courtroom with his badge polished and his head high, ignoring the flashing cameras outside and the murmurs inside. When he reached the front, he paused only once, to glance over his shoulder and make sure Luna was still behind him. She was. She wore the same backpack from the day of the parade. She clutched a small paper in her hand, a note she'd written, and asked the judge if she could read. Permission was granted. She stepped up to the witness stand, her shoes barely brushing the floor. She didn't look at Elroy. She looked straight at the jury. "When he took me," she said, "I thought I would disappear. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just waited, because I didn't think anyone would come." Her hand dropped gently to Rex's back. "But someone did. He heard me. He didn't need words. He just knew." She opened the paper and unfolded it carefully. "It's not long," she said. "It's a list." She read, "Things that are louder than a scream. 1. A dog's growl. 2. A quiet whimper that says something's wrong. 3. A person who listens. 4. A truth that doesn't go away." There was no sound in the courtroom, not even shuffling papers, not even a cough. Luna looked down at Rex. "And 5, she added, "a friend who doesn't stop until he finds you." When she sat back down, Rex placed his head on her lap. She didn't cry. Neither did Natalie. But the jurors did. They returned with a verdict in less than 2 hours. Guilty. All counts, including federal conspiracy, interstate abduction, and endangerment of minors. Elroy wouldn't see the outside of a prison ever again. But the victory wasn't in the sentencing. It wasn't even in the courtroom. It was in the way Luna stood tall as she walked out, backpack slung over her shoulder, Rex beside her, matching her stride. It was in the way parents clutched their children tighter in the hallway. And it was in the email Natalie received that night from a high school counselor in Indiana. The subject line read, "One of my students just told me what happened. We never would have known if not for your dog." Natalie closed the laptop slowly. She looked at Rex, who lay curled at her feet, his tail tapping against the floor in an easy rhythm. "You're not just a K9 anymore," she said. He looked up, blinked once. "You're the reason this case didn't stay hidden. You're the reason silence lost." Rex stood, stretched, then walked over and rested his chin on her knee. Like he already knew, Rex's last official day with the department started without fanfare. No sirens, no flags, just the soft shuffle of boots on tile as he walked one final time through the precinct's back hallway, his nails clicking quietly against the linoleum. Officers stood aside as he passed. Some saluted. Some bent down to scratch behind his ears. All of them understood. He wasn't just retiring. He was being honored. The squad room had been cleared out and decorated with simple touches. A cake shaped like a dog bone sat on the back table. A framed commendation from the chief hung beside a photograph of Rex, mid-run, taken the day he brought Luna home. Natalie stood at the front, in uniform, badge polished to a quiet shine. She cleared her throat and smiled at the faces gathered before her. "When I first got paired with Rex," she said. "I thought I was training a tool, a resource, another asset for patrol." She looked down at him. Rex sat beside her, ears high, body relaxed, but alert. "But what I got was something else entirely. I got a partner who knew things before I did, who felt fear in the quiet, who could find what we couldn't see, and who, when it mattered most, chose to stop, to freeze, to listen." Her voice softened. "There's a little girl sleeping in her own bed tonight because of that decision. There are others too, parents who finally got answers, survivors who finally spoke up." She paused. "I thought I was protecting the community, but he protected us." The room clapped. Not loud, not showy, just firm, solid respect. Later that evening, Natalie and Rex visited Luna's house for dinner. Spaghetti, garlic bread, store-bought brownies. Luna wore a t-shirt with Rex's face on the front and the words, "He heard me," printed underneath. They ate in the driveway on folding chairs. Fireflies blinked above them. Laughter came easily. As the stars brightened, Luna pulled Natalie aside. "I wrote something," she said, handing over a folded piece of paper. Natalie opened it carefully. A drawing. Rex stood at the center, tall and glowing. Around him were children, some drawn with tear streaks, others holding signs that said, "Thank you," and "I remember." Above the scene, in Luna's handwriting, "The dog who made the world a little safer." Natalie didn't say anything, just reached down and wrapped her arm around the girl's shoulders. "He still is," she whispered. That night, back at home, Natalie sat on the porch with a glass of iced tea and her boots kicked off. Rex lay beside her, snoring softly, paws twitching like he was running in his dreams again. She looked out at the quiet street, at the sky stretched wide and calm above them. "You ready for what's next?" she asked. Rex lifted his head, blinked at her, then placed one paw gently on her foot. No words, no need, because heroes don't retire, they evolve. And sometimes they leave behind more than closed cases. They leave behind the courage to speak, to listen, and to believe the next time a dog refuses to move. If this story moved you, if you believe in the silent bravery of dogs like Rex, share this with someone who needs to remember that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they walk on 4 paws. Subscribe to German Shepherd, where real stories of loyalty, courage, and second chances come alive. What's your story with a loyal pet? Tell us in the comments. We're listening.